My name is Veronica, and I am 34 years old. I stood in the doorway of my empty house, watching my husband load the last of his boxes into his car. My best friend Heather sat in the passenger seat, applying lipstick like she was heading to brunch, instead of destroying my entire world. Derek turned around and gave me this smile, this confident, self-satisfied grin that said he believed with every fiber of his being that he had won. My mother had just died 1 week ago. 1 week. And here was my husband leaving me for my best friend, convinced he was walking away with everything that mattered. But there was something he did not know, something my mother had prepared long before she took her final breath. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if stories about betrayal and unexpected justice speak to you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you're going to want to stay with me for this one, because what Derek and Heather thought they knew was only half the story. The truth was about to change everything. I need to take you back 8 years to help you understand how I ended up standing in that doorway, watching my life drive away. I met Derek at a charity fundraiser in downtown Boston on a cold November evening. I was 26 years old, freshly promoted to project manager at an architecture firm, and feeling like I was finally becoming the woman I always wanted to be. I wore a deep green dress that night, one my mother helped me pick out during one of our weekend shopping trips. She told me the color brought out my eyes. Derek approached me near the silent auction table. He was tall, with dark hair, and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He complimented my dress, asked what I did for work, and listened with what seemed like genuine interest as I rambled about blueprints and building codes. He was a newly hired insurance salesman, he told me, still learning the ropes, but ambitious and ready to make something of himself. I found his honesty refreshing. Most men I met at those events tried to impress me with exaggerated stories of success. Derek seemed comfortable admitting he was still figuring things out. We exchanged numbers that night, and by the following weekend, we were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the North End. He remembered details I had mentioned in passing. He asked about my sister Natalie, who was in medical school in California. He asked about my mother Eleanor and her bakery in Rhode Island. I remember thinking how rare it was to meet someone who actually paid attention. Within 3 months, I was convinced I had found my person. Within 6 months, he proposed at a seaside restaurant in Cape Cod. With a modest ring, he apologized for not being able to afford something bigger. I told him the ring was perfect because he was perfect. Our wedding was small but beautiful, held at a vineyard in the Berkshires, with fall leaves creating a golden backdrop. Heather was my maid of honor. She gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes, talking about our friendship that began freshman year of college, in a cramped dorm room with bad lighting and worse coffee. She called me her sister in every way that mattered. She said Derek was the luckiest man alive to have found me. The first 2 years of marriage felt like a dream. We were living together in a modest apartment in the suburbs of Boston. Derek would wake up early on Saturdays to make pancakes with fresh blueberries, because he knew they were my favorite. He brought flowers home every Friday, a tradition he said he wanted to keep forever. We spent Sunday afternoons walking through Boston Common, holding hands and talking about the future. Children, maybe. A bigger house someday. Growing old together on a porch somewhere, watching the sunset. I introduced Derek to my mother during Thanksgiving of our first year together. We drove down to Rhode Island to her old colonial house that always smelled like cinnamon and vanilla from decades of baking. My mother was polite, but I noticed she did not embrace Derek the way she embraced Natalie's boyfriends in the past. When I asked her about it later, she simply said some people take time to know. I did not understand what she meant, and I did not push. I assumed she was just being protective the way mothers often are with their daughters. Heather became a regular fixture in our lives after the wedding. She had always been my closest friend, the person I called first with good news and bad. We met in our university dormitory, both 18 and terrified, and trying to pretend we knew what we were doing. We stayed up countless nights eating pizza and talking about everything from boys to career dreams to what we wanted our lives to look like. She stood beside me through every breakup, every disappointment, every triumph. When I got engaged, she screamed so loud through the phone I had to hold it away from my ear. After I married Derek, she would come over to our apartment, often bringing wine and gossip from her job in real estate. She was ambitious, always talking about her next deal, her next commission check, her plans to buy property and build wealth. I admired her drive, even if it sometimes felt exhausting to keep up with. Derek seemed to enjoy her company too. They would joke around while I cooked dinner, and I remember feeling grateful that my husband and best friend got along so well. Not everyone is lucky enough to have that kind of harmony in their life. My mother Eleanor was a remarkable woman, though I did not fully appreciate how remarkable until much later. She had raised my sister and me alone after our father died when I was 12. He had a heart attack shoveling snow one winter morning and was gone before the ambulance arrived. My mother never remarried. She poured everything into her bakery and into us. Eleanor's Sweet Corner started as one small shop and grew to 3 locations across New England. She woke up at 4 in the morning every day for 40 years to make sure the croissants were fresh and the coffee was hot. Her hands were always dusted with flour, her apron always stained with butter, and I never once heard her complain. She lived modestly in the same house where I grew up, even after the bakeries became successful. She drove an old Honda she bought used in 2008. She wore clothes until they wore out and then donated them to the church thrift store. I assumed she was comfortable but not wealthy. She never talked about money with us, except to say that financial security came from hard work and smart choices. She always told me that money had a strange power over people. It could reveal the truth of someone's heart faster than anything else. I remember one afternoon sitting on her porch drinking iced tea while Derek and Natalie played cornhole in the yard. My mother looked at Derek for a long moment, then turned to me and said something I have never forgotten. She said, "Veronica, money can buy many things, but it can also expose what is really inside a person. Remember that when the time comes." I laughed and asked her what she meant. She just smiled and changed the subject. That conversation haunted me for years without me even knowing why. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I was too naive or too in love to recognize at the time. They started appearing around our 3rd year of marriage, subtle shifts that I explained away with excuses and rationalizations. Derek began asking questions about my mother's business with increasing frequency. He wanted to know how much the bakeries earned, what the property values were worth, whether my mother had considered selling or expanding. I thought he was just being practical, thinking about our future and how my family's assets might play a role in it someday. It did not occur to me that his interest was calculating rather than caring. He also started coming home later from work, claiming he had client meetings that ran long or networking events he could not miss. The Saturday pancakes became sporadic, then disappeared entirely. The Friday flowers stopped arriving somewhere around month 18 of our marriage, though I cannot pinpoint exactly when. I told myself that the honeymoon phase naturally fades, that all couples settle into routines that feel less romantic but are no less loving. I made excuses because making excuses was easier than confronting the possibility that something was wrong. Heather's presence in our lives intensified during this period. She would show up at our apartment when I was still at work, saying she happened to be in the neighborhood and wanted to wait for me. I would come home to find her and Derek laughing on the couch, watching television, or looking at something on his phone. They always had explanations. She was asking his advice on insurance policies for a new property she was buying. He was helping her compare rates and coverage options. I believed them because why would I not believe my husband and my best friend? One evening, I left work early because I had finished a project ahead of schedule. I wanted to surprise Derek with dinner reservations at the new restaurant he had been wanting to try. When I walked into the apartment, Heather was sitting very close to him on the couch, closer than seemed necessary. They jumped apart when they heard the door open, their faces flushed with something I could not quite name. Derek said they were looking at vacation photos on his phone from Heather's recent trip to Miami. Heather laughed and said she was showing him the terrible sunburn she got on her shoulders. I looked at the phone and saw a normal photo of a beach at sunset. I felt something twist in my stomach, but I pushed it down. I convinced myself I was being paranoid and jealous and unfair. Then my mother got sick. The diagnosis came suddenly and brutally. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs and the ground from beneath my feet. My mother was 67 years old and had never been sick a day in her life. She still worked at the bakery every morning, still baked her famous apple turnovers, still greeted customers by name. The idea that she might be dying seemed impossible, a cruel joke the universe was playing. I threw myself into caring for her, driving down to Rhode Island every weekend, and sometimes during the week when I could manage it. I hired nurses to help when I could not be there. I researched treatment options and clinical trials and alternative therapies. I did everything a daughter could do, and it was never enough because nothing could be enough against a disease that aggressive. Derek was supportive at first, or at least performed the motions of support. He said the right things. He held me when I cried. But as the weeks turned into months, I noticed a shift. He started complaining that I was never home, that I was neglecting our marriage, that my mother's illness was consuming everything. He said he understood that family was important, but he was my family too, and I was abandoning him. I felt guilty. Of course I felt guilty. I was trying to balance an impossible situation and failing at all of it. I apologized. I promised to do better. I tried to be a better wife while also trying to be a good daughter, while also trying to maintain my career, while also trying not to completely fall apart. And during all of this, Heather stepped in, offering to help. She would come over to cook dinner for Derek on the nights I was in Rhode Island. She would keep him company, she said, so he would not be so lonely. I thanked her profusely. I told her she was the best friend anyone could ever ask for. About 2 months before my mother passed, she called me to her bedside during one of my weekend visits. The chemo had taken her hair and her weight and so much of her strength, but her eyes were still sharp, still fierce, with the intelligence that had built an empire from flour and sugar. She took my hand in hers and said, "Veronica, I have been working with Mr. Whitman on some things. Everything is arranged." I asked her what she meant. What things? What arrangements? She just smiled and said, "You will understand when the time comes." I pressed her for details, but she changed the subject, asking about my work about Natalie, about a recipe she wanted me to have. Then she said something that stopped my heart. She said, "My darling girl, remember this. The people who truly love you will be there when you have nothing. The ones who only love what you have will show themselves when they think there is something to take. Watch carefully and you will see." I asked her why she was telling me this. Her eyes filled with something that might have been sadness or might have been warning. She squeezed my hand and said, "Because I love you and I need you to be prepared." I did not understand. I would not understand for months. But I hugged her and told her I loved her and promised I would remember. 2 months later, she was gone. My mother passed away on a Tuesday morning in early October. The leaves outside her window had just started to turn golden and orange, the colors she always loved most. Natalie flew in from California, and we were both there holding her hands when she took her last breath. She looked peaceful, almost like she was just sleeping, except she was so still. I had never seen anything so still in my entire life. The funeral was held 3 days later at the small Catholic church she had attended every Sunday for as long as I could remember. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects, customers from the bakery friends, from the community neighbours who remembered when she used to bring cookies to every block party. Person after person stood up to share stories about her kindness, her generosity, her way of making everyone feel special. I tried to speak, but my voice broke after the first sentence, and Natalie had to take over for me. Derek stood beside me throughout the service, his hand on my back, his face arranged in an appropriate expression of sympathy. But something felt wrong. He kept glancing at his phone. He whispered to Heather during the eulogy. He seemed restless, impatient, like he was waiting for something to end, so something else could begin. I told myself I was being unfair. I was grieving, and grief makes everything seem distorted and wrong. 1 week after the funeral, Mr. Whitman called to invite us to his office for the reading of the will. Derek insisted on coming with me, saying he wanted to support me through the difficult process. Looking back, I understand that his eagerness had nothing to do with support and everything to do with expectation. He expected a payday. He expected that my mother's decades of work would translate into a financial windfall that would change our lives, change his life. We gathered in Mr. Whitman's office on a grey Thursday afternoon. Natalie had flown back to California for a surgery she could not reschedule, but she joined by video call. Derek sat beside me, his leg bouncing with barely contained anticipation. "Mr. Whitman, a kind man in his 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, opened the folder containing my mother's will. The terms were straightforward. The 3 bakery locations were left to Natalie, who had always shown more interest in the family business than I had. The house in Rhode Island was donated to a local charity that supported families affected by cancer. The remaining financial assets, totaling approximately $50,000, were to be divided equally between Natalie and me, $25,000 each. The room fell silent. Derek's legs stopped bouncing. His face shifted through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, then something darker, disappointment, anger. He managed to control his voice when he spoke, but I could hear the edge beneath his words. That is all he asked. That is everything she left behind. Mr. Whitman looked at Derek with an expression I could not quite read. It almost seemed like he was studying him, cataloguing his reaction for some purpose I did not understand. He said, "Yes, this is the public will, as filed with the probate court." Derek did not seem to notice the careful way Mr. Whitman phrased his answer. He was too busy recalculating, trying to understand how his expectations had fallen so short of reality. The drive home was tense. Derek barely spoke, and when he did, his words dripped with resentment. "I cannot believe it," he finally said as we pulled into our driveway. "Your mother worked her entire life, and that is all she managed to save. $25,000 each. That is nothing." I stared at him. My mother had just died. We were driving home from reading her will, and his first reaction was to complain about the amount of money he was not even entitled to receive. Something cracked inside me in that moment. A small fissure in the foundation of everything I believed about my husband. I told him the money was not the point. I told him my mother left us. Her love, her memories, her recipes, the values she taught us. Those things were priceless. He laughed. Actually laughed. He said, "Love does not pay mortgages, Veronica. Love does not buy vacations or nice cars or the kind of life I thought we were building together." He went inside and slammed the door and did not speak to me for the rest of the night. 2 days later, I discovered the truth. Derek left his phone on the kitchen counter when he went to take a shower. A message notification lit up the screen. It was from Heather. The preview showed only the first few words, but those words were enough. Only 50,000 she had written. The old woman fooled us all. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I scrolled through their message history, and the world I thought I knew collapsed around me. They had been having an affair for 2 years. 2 years of I love yous and I miss yous, and I cannot wait until we can be together. 2 years of planning and scheming and waiting for my mother to die so they could take what they assumed would be a fortune. Heather wrote about how she was only staying close to me because she knew my family had money. Derek wrote about how he had been patient for 8 years, waiting for the payoff that he believed was coming. They joked about me. They mocked my devotion to my dying mother. They called me naive and trusting and too stupid to see what was happening right in front of me. I photographed every message, hundreds of them. Then I put the phone back exactly where Derek had left it and went to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed and tried to remember how to breathe. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Derek snored beside me, wondering how the person I had shared my life with for 8 years could be such a complete stranger. I thought about confronting him immediately, throwing the evidence in his face and demanding an explanation. But something held me back. Some instinct that told me to wait, to think, to plan. I did not have to wait long. 5 days after my mother's funeral, Derek came home from work with a suitcase already packed. He stood in the living room and delivered his announcement with the same casual tone he might use to discuss dinner plans. "I want a divorce," he said. "I have not been happy for a long time, and I think we both deserve a chance to find real fulfillment elsewhere." I asked him if this was about Heather. I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of guilt or shame. Instead, I saw surprise. Surprise that I knew, then a kind of relief, like he was glad the secret was finally out so he could stop pretending. "Yes," he admitted. "Heather and I have developed feelings for each other. It was not planned. It just happened. We tried to fight it, but sometimes love is stronger than loyalty." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. I wanted to hurt him the way he was hurting me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I asked him how long. He hesitated, then said it did not matter how long. What mattered was that he was being honest now. 2 years, I said. "You have been lying to me for 2 years. You have been sleeping with my best friend in our home while I was taking care of my dying mother." His expression flickered. Annoyance, maybe, or inconvenience at being caught in the details of his deception. He said it was more complicated than that. He said I had pushed him away. He said my obsession with my mother had left him lonely and vulnerable, and Heather had simply been there. I laughed. The sound surprised me. It was not a happy laugh, but it was genuine in its disbelief. "You are blaming me," I said. "You cheated on me with my best friend for 2 years, and you're actually standing there blaming me." He shrugged. "I am not looking to fight, Veronica. I am looking to move on. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." An hour later, Heather arrived to help Derek load his things into his car. She did not have the decency to look embarrassed. Instead, she walked into my home like she belonged. There took Derek's hand right in front of me and gave me a smile that was almost pitying. "Veronica," she said, "I know this is hard, but you have to understand that Derek and I have something real. We tried to resist it, we really did. But love is love, and you cannot control who your heart chooses." I stared at the woman I had called my sister for 12 years, the woman who had held my hand through every heartbreak, every disappointment, every fear, the woman who had stood beside me at my wedding and promised in her toast to always be there for me. I asked her if any of it had been real, our friendship, our bond, the years we spent together building what I thought was an unbreakable connection. She tilted her head like she was considering the question for the first time. "Honestly," she said, "I saw potential in you. Your family had that bakery business, and your mother seemed like the type to have money hidden away somewhere. I thought it would be worth my time to stay close." She paused and glanced at Derek. Turns out I was wrong about the money, but I got something better out of it anyway. I could not speak. There were no words for what I was feeling. Betrayal does not begin to cover it. This was something deeper, something that reached into the core of who I was, and tore away pieces I did not know could be taken. Derek finished loading the car. Before he got in, he turned to look at me one final time. "You know, Veronica," he said, "you should really thank me. I gave you 8 good years. I made you feel loved and wanted and special. That has to count for something, right? And now you are free to find someone who actually wants to be with you." Heather kissed him right there in our driveway in full view of the neighbors. Then she climbed into the passenger seat and they drove away. I stood there watching the car disappear around the corner, and I felt something inside me break. Not crack, not fracture. Break completely. I do not know how long I stood there before Mrs. Patterson from next door came over and put her arm around me. She said she had seen Derek loading the car. She asked if I was okay. I could not answer. I let her guide me back inside my empty house, and I sat on the couch where just days ago Heather had been sitting so close to my husband, and I finally let myself cry. That night, I called Natalie. I told her everything through sobs that made my words nearly incomprehensible. She wanted to fly back immediately, but she was in the middle of a critical rotation at the hospital, and I told her not to come. I told her I would be okay, even though I did not believe it. I told her I just needed to hear her voice. When we hung up, I sat in the darkness and tried to understand how my life had fallen apart so completely. My mother was dead. My husband had left me for my best friend. The 2 people I trusted most outside of my family had been conspiring against me for years. And to make it worse, they were walking away believing they had won, believing that I was left with nothing while they had each other. I thought about my mother's words, the ones about money revealing the truth of a person's heart. I understood now what she had been trying to tell me. She had seen something in Derek that I had been too in love to see. She had tried to warn me in her own gentle way. And she had done something else too, something I would not discover until the next morning. The phone rang at 9 in the morning. I had finally fallen into a fitful sleep sometime around dawn, and the sound jolted me awake with my heart racing and my mind foggy. It was Mr. Whitman, the lawyer. "Veronica," he said, his voice warm but businesslike, "I need you to come to my office today. There is something important we need to discuss regarding your mother's estate." I told him I did not understand. We had already read the will. The assets had already been distributed. What else could there possibly be? "There is another document," he said, "a private addendum that your mother left specific instructions about. She wanted it to be opened only after certain conditions were met. I believe those conditions have now been satisfied." I drove to his office in a daze, still wearing the clothes I had slept in my hair, uncombed my eyes, swollen from crying. Mr. Whitman greeted me with a gentleness that made me want to start crying all over again. He led me to his conference room and placed a sealed envelope on the table between us. "Your mother gave this to me 3 years ago," he explained. "She said it was to be opened. When, and I am quoting her directly, the people around my daughter have shown their true colours. I believe based on recent events that this condition has been met." He handed me a letter, my mother's handwriting. My hand shook as I unfolded it. "My dearest Veronica," she had written. "If you are reading this letter, then I was right about some things I hoped I was wrong about. I am so sorry, sweetheart. No mother wants to see her child hurt. But I need you to know that I have done everything in my power to protect you, even though I cannot be there to do it myself." About a year before I got sick, I saw something that broke my heart. I was in Providence for a doctor's appointment, and I stopped at a cafe for coffee afterward. Derek was there with Heather. They were holding hands across the table. They kissed when they thought no one was watching. I watched for almost an hour, not believing what I was seeing. When I got home, I hired a private investigator. I have copies of everything: photographs, records, evidence of what they have been doing behind your back. I did not tell you because I knew you would not believe me. I knew you loved him too much to see the truth. And I knew that if I forced the issue, I would only push you away. So I did the only thing I could do. I prepared. The will you heard read in Mr. Whitman's office was real, but it was not complete. There is a private trust that I established years ago. It contains the true extent of what I have built over my lifetime. This trust is for you and you alone. No spouse can touch it. No one can claim it as marital property. It is yours regardless of what happens in your marriage. I am leaving you $4 million, Veronica. $2 million in cash held in the trust. A beachfront house in Cape Cod worth approximately $1.5 million. And stock in an investment firm worth about $800,000. I sold the bakeries 10 years ago for far more than anyone knew, and I invested wisely. I lived simply because I wanted to protect this money for you and your sister for when you would need it most. The bakeries I left to Natalie in the public were bought back by me through a shell company. They are actually part of this trust as well, to be divided between you as you both see fit. I wanted Derek and anyone like him to believe there was nothing. I wanted them to reveal themselves, and based on the fact that you are reading this, they have. Use this money to build a beautiful life, my darling. Find someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have. And remember always that your mother loved you more than words could ever express. Forever yours, Mom. I read the letter 3 times before the words began to make sense. $4 million. My mother had left me $4 million. She had spent the last years of her life arranging everything so that when the betrayal came, and she somehow knew it would come, I would be protected. Mr. Whitman explained the details. The trust was ironclad. Nothing in it could be considered marital property. Derek had no claim to any of it. The timing of the divorce actually worked in my favor. He had left believing there was nothing, and now there was everything. I thought about Derek and Heather driving away in his car, so confident they had won. They had no idea. They had abandoned me when they thought I was worthless, and in doing so, they had given up any chance of claiming what I was actually worth. For the first time in days, I felt something other than pain. It started small, just a flicker of warmth in my chest. It grew into something stronger. Not happiness exactly, not yet. But something like hope, something like the first breath after being underwater for too long. Mr. Whitman handed me the keys to the house in Cape Cod. He gave me account numbers and contact information for the financial advisors who managed the trust. He told me my mother had thought of everything. Before I left, he gave me one more envelope, smaller than the first. Inside was a handwritten note on a piece of paper that smelled faintly of vanilla. My mother's favorite. You deserve to be loved for exactly who you are, she had written, not for what you have or what someone thinks they can take from you. Find that love, sweetheart. It exists. I promise you it exists. I folded the note carefully and put it in my pocket close to my heart. Then I walked out of that office and into the rest of my life. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. I hired Margaret Sullivan, the best divorce attorney in Boston, based on Mr. Whitman's recommendation. She reviewed my case with the efficiency of someone who had seen every possible version of marital betrayal and found mine to be refreshingly straightforward. Derek had no claim to the trust. The assets had been established before our marriage and were explicitly protected from any spousal division. The only property we actually needed to divide was our apartment and the cars and our joint savings account. Margaret discovered during her investigation that Derek had been using our shared credit card to buy gifts for Heather for the past 2 years. Jewelry, dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to hotels I had never heard of. The total exceeded $30,000. She told me I could pursue reimbursement. She told me Derek would likely settle rather than have the details of his infidelity entered into public record. She was right. When we finally sat down in a conference room to negotiate the divorce terms, Derek's confidence had noticeably dimmed. He demanded half of everything which Margaret calmly informed him was not going to happen. She presented evidence of his affair. She presented receipts showing how he had spent marital funds on his mistress. She explained that in Massachusetts, Adultery could significantly impact the division of assets, especially when financial misconduct was involved. Derek's lawyer whispered something to him. His face went pale. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Fear, maybe, or the dawning realization that he had made a terrible miscalculation. In the end, I kept the apartment, he kept his car, we split the joint savings account, though the amount he spent on Heather was deducted from his share first. He signed the papers without another word of protest. Margaret told me it was one of the quickest divorces she had ever handled. As we were leaving the conference room, Derek grabbed my arm. His grip was not violent, but it was desperate. "There is more money," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Your mother had more. I know she did." "Where is it, Veronica? Where are you hiding it?" I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. This man I had loved for 8 years. This man who had held me on our wedding day and promised to cherish me forever. This man who had betrayed me in every possible way and was now demanding to know what else he could take. "You chose to leave when you thought I had nothing," I told him. "That was your decision. You do not get to come back now and ask what else there might be." I pulled my arm away and walked out of the building. I did not look back. 3 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances what had happened to Derek and Heather. Their fairy tale romance had soured almost immediately. Without the fantasy of stolen wealth to sustain them, they were forced to confront the reality of who they actually were, two selfish people who had bonded over betrayal and greed. Derek lost his job. His sales numbers had been declining for months, while he focused on his affair instead of his work. The insurance company finally let him go, citing poor performance. Heather was furious. She had expected to gain a partner who would help support her ambitions, not a burden she would have to carry. They fought constantly. The friends who told me this took perhaps too much pleasure in the details. Apparently, neighbours in their apartment complex could hear them screaming at each other most nights. Heather accused Derek of being lazy and unmotivated. Derek accused Heather of being materialistic and cold. They were both right. Someone told Heather about my house in Cape Cod, about the trips I was taking to Europe, about the new bakery I was planning to open. She called me crying, saying she had made a terrible mistake, saying Derek had manipulated her, saying she wanted her best friend back. I did not answer. I blocked her number and her email and every social media account she tried to contact me through. Some bridges cannot be rebuilt once they have been burned. 6 months after the divorce, Derek showed up at my new home. I do not know how he found the address, but suddenly, there he was standing at my front door, looking nothing like the confident man who had walked away from our marriage. He had lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, there were dark circles under his eyes. He begged, actually got down on his knees and begged me to take him back. He said he had made the worst mistake of his life. He said Heather meant nothing to him. He said he had always loved me and he could not believe he had thrown away everything we had built together. I let him finish. I let him say every word he had prepared. Then I told him the truth as gently as I could. "Derek, I said you left me when you thought I had nothing. You are coming back because you found out I have something. Do you understand what that says about you? Do you understand why I could never trust you again?" He started to argue, to make excuses, to blame circumstances and misunderstandings and everything except himself. I held up my hand. "I hope you find happiness," I told him. "I genuinely do. But you will never find it with me. We are done." I called security to escort him off the property. As they led him away, he kept looking back at me with an expression I will never forget. It was the face of someone who finally understood the cost of their choices. Someone who realized too late that they had traded everything valuable for something worthless. I closed the door and stood in my beautiful new home and felt nothing but peace. Healing did not happen overnight. Anyone who tells you that heartbreak can be fixed quickly is either lying or has never truly been broken. The first months after Derek left were some of the hardest of my life. I would wake up in the middle of the night reaching for someone who was not there. I would see something funny and want to share it before remembering I had no one to share it with. I would catch myself wondering what I had done wrong to deserve such betrayal, before reminding myself that their choices were not my fault. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Patterson, who helped me understand that grief is not linear and healing is not a destination but a journey. I kept a journal where I wrote down everything I was feeling: the anger, the sadness, the confusion, the moments of unexpected strength. Writing helped me process emotions I did not have words for. Natalie flew out to stay with me for a month between rotations. We sat on the porch of my new Cape Cod house and talked about Mom. We looked through old photo albums and laughed at pictures of ourselves as children covered in flour from helping at the bakery. We cried together and held each other and promised that no matter what happened, we would always have each other. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to get better. I took a leave of absence from my architecture firm and decided to travel. I went to Paris first because Mum had always wanted to go and never had the chance. I walked along the Seine at sunset and scattered some of her ashes near the Eiffel Tower. I whispered that I loved her, and I hoped she could see how beautiful it was. From Paris, I went to Florence, where I took a cooking class in a centuries-old villa. I learned to make fresh pasta from scratch and tiramisu that melted on my tongue. The instructor, an elderly Italian woman named Giovanna, told me I had good hands that knew how to work with love. I thought of my mother rolling out pie crust in her kitchen, and I smiled. I spent 2 weeks in Santorini watching sunsets that painted the sky in colors I had never seen before. I read books and swam in the ocean and let myself feel small in the vastness of the world. I talked to strangers and heard their stories and realized that everyone carries wounds. The difference is whether you let those wounds define you or drive you. When I returned to Boston, I knew what I wanted to do. I used part of my inheritance to open a small bakery in the city. I called it Eleanor's Daughter. We sold the recipes my mother had perfected over 40 years. Apple turnovers and blueberry muffins, and a chocolate croissant that people lined up around the block to taste. The first day we opened, a woman came in who had been a customer at my mother's original shop. She took one bite of a cinnamon roll and started crying. She said it tasted exactly like she remembered. She said eating it felt like being wrapped in a warm hug from someone who loved you. I had to go to the back room and compose myself before I could continue serving customers. Marcus from my old architecture firm reached out not long after the bakery opened. He said he had heard about what happened and he was sorry. He said he had always admired my strength and resilience. We started meeting for coffee, then dinner, then long walks through the city talking about everything and nothing. I was careful this time. I did not rush. I did not let loneliness push me towards something I was not ready for. But Marcus was patient. He was kind. He asked about my mother and actually listened when I answered. He came to the bakery and swept the floors without being asked. He told me he did not care about my money. He cared about me. I told him about Derek and Heather. All of it. The affair and the betrayal and the moment I stood in that doorway, watching my life drive away. He listened without judgment. Then he told me that anyone who could not see my worth was not worth my tears. He said I deserved someone who would stay when things were hard. Someone who loved me not for what I had, but for who I was. It has been a year now since my mother passed. The bakery is thriving. Natalie invested and we run it together on the weekends when she can fly in. Marcus and I are taking things slowly, but there is something there, something real, something built on honesty and mutual respect, rather than illusions and false promises. I heard recently that Derek and Heather broke up. She threw him out after he failed to find another job. He is living with a friend now trying to get back on his feet. Part of me feels nothing when I hear this. Another part feels something that might be compassion. He made terrible choices, but he is still a human being struggling with the consequences of his actions. I do not hate them anymore. Hate takes too much energy. It keeps you tethered to the people and moments that hurt you. I have chosen instead to let go, to focus on what I am building rather than what was destroyed, to honor my mother's memory by living well and loving fully and never again letting someone else determine my worth. Mom was right about everything. Money does reveal the truth of a person's heart. Derek and Heather showed exactly who they were when they thought there was something to gain. They showed it again when they realized they had miscalculated. Their betrayal was devastating, but it was also a gift. It freed me from a marriage built on lies. It showed me who my real friends were. It forced me to become stronger than I ever knew I could be. They walked away thinking they had won. Derek with his smug smile, Heather with her pitying condescension. They were so certain they had gotten everything they wanted while leaving me with nothing. But in the end, losing them was the greatest victory I never knew I needed. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire story. I know it was a long one, but I hope it touched something in you the way telling it has touched something in me. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone in your life who showed their true colors when they thought there was something to gain? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? How did you heal? How did you find your way back to yourself? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences might help someone else who is going through something similar right now. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you are not already subscribed to this channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss another story. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Someone who is going through a hard time. Someone who needs to be reminded that the people who leave when things get difficult are not the people you want in your life anyway. Remember this: the people who truly love you will stay when you have nothing. The ones who only love what you have will show themselves when the opportunity comes. And when they do, let them go. Let them walk away. Because their leaving is not your loss. It is your liberation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are worthy of real love. The kind that stays. The kind that sees you. The kind that chooses you again and again no matter what. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.